What if everything you think you know about Masonic symbols is only the surface, and the real meaning has been hiding in plain sight all along? In this episode, we sit down with guest reviewer Dennis Yates to unpack Albert Mackey's The Symbolism of Freemasonry, exploring the deeper philosophical and esoteric truths behind the winding stairs, the northeast corner, and more. If you've ever wondered whether there's more to the symbols than what's taught in Lodge, this conversation will challenge your perspective and take your understanding to a whole new level.
The opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the hosts and guests, and do not represent the views of any Grand Lodge nor appendant body of Freemasonry.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Masonic Shelf Podcast, a once-a-month journey through some of the best in Masonic books and writings, and occasionally a guest reviewer. My name is Chris Williams.
And I am Brad Kohanke, and we do have a very special guest reviewer this evening. Joining us on the podcast is the host of Masonic Improvement, which is why I'm wearing this shirt. He is also a past master of Goliad Lodge and served as district deputy in 2022. A lot of you know him as the regular host on Masonic Improvement, Brother Dennis Yates. Welcome to the show, Brother Dennis. It's really good to have you. I know we've had this in the works for a while, but it's good to see you again, buddy.
Thank you for having me. I couldn't be more honored. It's not only a privilege, but an honor to be on the show. And I am super stoked about our conversation tonight.
So
hopefully it'll be as exciting for you.
Tell the audience what book you chose for us to review this time.
So after long deliberations, I chose The Symbolism of Freemasonry by Albert G. Mackey. There's several different versions out there, but only the base content is wonderful, and I think everybody will gain a lot from it if they take a minute to read.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and do a brief intro for the book, and then we'll get started.
All right.
Tonight, we're diving into one of the classic texts of Masonic literature, The Symbolism of Freemasonry by Albert G. Mackey. It was first published in 1869. This book has become one of the foundational works for anyone interested in understanding the deeper meanings behind the symbols, rituals, and allegories used throughout the craft. Freemasonry is often described as a system of morality veiled in allegory and illustrated by symbols. And Mackey set out to take that idea seriously, to explore where those symbols came from, how they developed, and what philosophical and spiritual ideas they were intended to convey. Drawing from history, comparative religion, classical philosophy, and early Masonic writings, he attempts to trace the symbolic language of the fraternity back to the ancient traditions and universal patterns of human thought. In this episode, we're not just summarizing the book. We'll be talking about what Mackey gets right, where his interpretations may stretch the historical evidence, and why this work has remained so influential among Masons for more than a century and a half. So whether you've read The Symbolism of Freemasonry several times or you're encountering Mackey's ideas for the first time, we hope this conversation helps illuminate some of the deeper currents running beneath the ritual and symbolism of the craft. So let's get started. Brother Dennis, this was a big book to pick. I don't know if we're going to be able to do it all in the time allotted to us.
Oh, sure we can. I'm not that. I'm a very shallow person, so I don't think that I have much to talk about.
Oh man!
Yeah, I think that'll probably be proven wrong here in a couple minutes.
I thought you were going to say I don't talk very long, and I was going to have to. Oh yeah.
Well, both are true. So I mean, you know, what can I say?
We've seen your show, Dennis.
Yeah, right. And you've only known me forever, so it's.
Yeah. Well, let's start with the preliminary because I already have a problem.
and I figured that you would, and I really, to be honest with you, the first 12 chapters were not my cup of tea. I'm not that kind of I don't like to read historical stuff that, where I derived all this information. He tries to do it similar to like the Old Testament in the Bible, where they talk about all the different, the lineage of every person, proving that he's worthy of being in the Bible before they give the story about that person, right? And that's kind of how the first, umpteen, chapters are in this. And so I can see where there would probably be several things that have been figured out since this time, since 1860. It was either 1860 or 1869 when this book was originally printed.
Yeah, 1869 is what it says. But the issue I have in this first chapter is his definitions of ancient masonry being twofold, one pure and one spurious. And I'm going to read this. The pure and spurious Freemasonry of antiquity and remaining separated for centuries upon centuries, they at length met at the building of the great temple of Jerusalem and were united in the instance of the Israelites under King Solomon and the Tyrians under Hiram, king of Tyre, and Hiram Abiff. The spurious Freemasonry, it is true, did not then and there cease to exist. On the contrary, it lasted for centuries subsequent to this period, for it was not until long after and in the reign of Emperor Theodosius that the pagan mysteries were finally and totally abolished. By the union of the Jewish or pure Freemasons and the Tyrian or spurious Freemasons at Jerusalem, there was a mutual infusion of their respective doctrines and ceremonies, which eventually terminated in the abolition of the two distinctive systems and the establishment of a new one that may be considered as the immediate prototype of the present institution. I think if you're going to say that Freemasonry goes back to the dawn of man, you can't divide it into two camps and call one pure and one spurious and still call yourself a Mason. They're teaching the same things, only one is in agreement with his particular religious beliefs and the other one is pagan. So the one that is in agreement with him is pure, quote unquote, and the one that isn't is spurious. And I really had a problem with that.
And it existed before the spurious. His version existed before the spurious. The pure was before the spurious.
Yeah. And how is that possible?
Well, see, I just kind of took it a little bit different in that particular part of it. I took it a little bit different, to be honest with you. So I may not be able to add much to this conversation, but when I read it, I was thinking in my mind, I was thinking, pure and spurious as one being actual craftsmen and one being speculative in nature. And I always, whenever I get down to thoughts like that, I always think that's what they're referencing when they're talking about things like that, because he's too smart of a man to do that. But
yeah, but
he
is smart. I'm not saying he wasn't a super intelligent guy, but I think he was clouded by his own personal religious beliefs, and he let that color his commentary on some of this stuff.
Yeah, and the pure Freemasonry that he pretty much defines pure Freemasonry as having nothing to do with the building trade, nothing to do with building. This was pure morals and divine truths and all of that stuff. And it wasn't until King Solomon's temple was entered into that everything turned into building. And but yeah,
he says that they borrowed it from the pagan mysteries where Bacchus, Adonis, and Proserpine and a host of other apotheosized beings play the same role as Hirondone is in the Masonic mysteries. And all of those groups, including the Dionysian artificers, were temple builders prior to the cathedral builders in Europe and all of that other stuff. I wanted to bring that out at the very beginning because he sets that definition up and then he kind of uses it throughout the rest of the book.
Yeah.
So I don't want to take away from the book because the rest of the book is fabulous.
Well,
I loved it. But
there again, I tend to when I read this, even especially from the very beginning, it's kind of setting the tone for the fact that we're talking about symbols, and when he's talking about pure symbolic definition, or pure symbolic glyphs, let's say, versus the symbolic nature of words, I think there's a difference in purity versus spurious. I don't know. I mean, I think that if it was broken down in that type of a scenario, which I did in my head when I was reading it, then it could fit. Because because that's what we're dealing with in essence is the evolution, basically the evolution of symbolism, and it began way before there were ever words.
One of my presentations, when I talk about some of these old Masonic authors trying to draw a correlation between the Freemasonry of today and the actual builders of Solomon's Temple, they're doing it in a way that is trying to claim that Hiram really was a member of some organized,
right,
proto-Orthodox Freemasonry, and
and there's nothing
may
that
have
really proves that.
I mean, he was a worker in brass and metals and designed all of the implements that were used in the temple, but there's nothing that says that he was the chief architect or that he even was an architect. So the whole story of Hiram is allegory. They pulled an actual historical being and built a story around him. And Albert is one of those guys that is trying to actually claim that he was a member of Freemasonry, with whatever it was called at that time, 4,000 years ago or 3,000 years ago, whatever. So I don't know. I wanted to get that out of the way.
That's fair. That's fair.
So let's talk about the book, Dennis. Let's go through it chapter by chapter and talk about the stuff that you found interesting.
In chapter 1, there was a lot of stuff that you weren't going to really start getting into his mind until you got into chapter 2 and chapter 3 and all that. I mean, the stuff he kind of threw out were kind of like, are you kidding me? You know, I kept asking questions in my head until I got to chapter 2, and then it started little by little. I started to understand what he was talking about. I mean, he's all about the intellectual part of Freemasonry. You know, where Pike is philosophical and Manly P. Hall is mystical. Well, he's all about the intellectual part of it, and his deal.
And his take on biblical stories is all very literal.
Yeah.
There are no allegories in the Bible to Albert Mackey. They're all historically factual.
Yeah.
So
yes, and I think that's probably why I had such a hard time reading the first parts, because I have a hard time with discussing allegory with Masons that feel that way. And I hate to, say that on your show, and I don't want you to lose
we've said it before.
Viewers
no big deal.
From that. But I feel like that's one of the big dilemmas of the day, right? It's probably always been that, there's so many things that are half tied to truths that for just to capture your attention, that too many people take it for facts. They
water them down for mainstream Masons for their understanding, and because they know that once you start getting into a little bit more complicated understanding, you lose people. You lose people,
Yes.
mentally. The eyes roll back, and they don't want to go any farther. And I don't mean afraid in that they're running screaming from the room, but they have a resistance to go in there.
Yes, I agree.
So, chapter 4, I'm going to start there because I didn't highlight anything in the first 3 chapters.
Okay. The only thing I really got from chapter 3, that was where he talked about Noah, right?
Yeah.
And the only thing I really took away from that was the fact that, when Noah, when it came to completion, Noah, immediately sacrificed to God and all that. And so that was what I focused in on was
Well, and then
sacrifice.
the descent of pure Freemasonry through two of his sons, and spurious Freemasonry through the other one who went. I mean,
Yeah, and
come
I get
on.
lost in that. I do because I don't really believe in that.
I don't either.
I tend to gloss over those kinds of thoughts and just focus in on the nitty gritty, like the sacrifice at the altar, because that is very important to Freemasonry.
So under spurious Freemasonry, this is under spurious Freemasonry. The mysteries constituted a school of religion. The candidate was taught that the multitudinous deities of the popular theology were but hidden symbols of the various attributes of the supreme God, a spirit invisible and indivisible, and that the soul, as an emanation from his essence, could never see corruption, but must, after the death of the body, be raised to an eternal life. What is spurious about that?
There's absolutely nothing spurious about that. I could that it couldn't be further from the truth, because that is
I mean, that's what Freemasonry teaches, and that's what the ancient mystery schools taught.
that's the essence of Freemasonry.
Well,
Oh,
and
and
that's the
Chris, you're going to like this part. And Plato says that the design of initiation was to restore the soul to that state of perfection from which it had originally fallen. Does that sound
bingo.
familiar?
Yes, it does. Talked about that a lot, haven't we?
Yeah.
But you know what? That's masonry. That's more, in my opinion, it's more pure masonry than. I mean, when you start adding the the religious parts to it and try to bend the understanding that way, I mean, it takes on a whole different uh, direction.
You hit the nail on the head. I mean, anytime we add our religious dogma to any discussion, it's going to uh, again, I'm not trying to ruin your show, but it bastardizes, the true intent of the lessons, in my opinion.
You're exactly right, but there is good in it. I mean,
There
the
there
religion,
absolutely
the
is.
religious connotations are there, whether you say them or not. I mean, whatever you were taught in your religion or your faith or whatever is there in your mind. And as you read these things, those things affect what you're reading, but they don't have to be. It's when you read them in the text, it's like they're being thrown against you. That's like they're being pushed down your throat. And it's so much nicer to read something, and because of something that you learn religiously in your faith or whatever that ties in with it, that's what makes it kind of neat. But to put it out there as fact or as uh legend or whatever, and that's the way it is, I think it turns a lot of people off.
Do you ever think
Yeah.
that maybe it just turns us off? It turns
I hope
everybody
not.
else on.
I hope not.
Well, and maybe so, because Mackey seems to be talking to his audience as if they all believe the same thing that he does. And yet
Exactly.
later on in the book, he chastises people for trying to Christianize Freemasonry.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
but he's, the way that he's talking about it it sounds like it's the exclusive property of Christians.
Yeah.
And it's
It's like
Well,
he's saying it's already here, but just don't take it too far.
well, and I like I said before, in the first, several chapters, it seems like that's what he's trying to do, is validate why someone should be reading this, because he's fixing to get into some abstract thoughts, and he's trying to validate to those readers that are on the fence to why they should be, so they're in the right place. So he's saying, you're okay, I'm okay, you're okay, we're here together. And then he starts going into these abstract thoughts
Oh,
in
okay.
his.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that
that's
makes sense.
that.
I hadn't considered that possibility, but yeah, I think you've got something there.
Yeah, that's kind of how I took it, but I was already there, I was already okay. So
Yeah. So then he goes on about the ancient mysteries of Egypt and Phoenicia and the Dionysian artificers. And we've talked about that stuff ad nauseum on this program, but
yes,
and I love that stuff, but it's not really relevant to what it is that he's going to be getting at.
right.
And
and and
then he
that's
gets to the union of speculative and operative masonry at the Temple of Solomon, which is what Chris was mentioning earlier. Um, you're right, Dennis. I mean, the first several chapters are just prep work. The traveling Freemasons of the Middle Ages. Okay,
yeah,
for some
I
reason
truly
I
believe
highlighted
that.
this.
Yeah, I truly believe it's just like they're, in the Bible, where they're validating their chapter of family lineage, that it's the same thing. He's validating, where he has authority, because he studied all these different things, and he's trying to, and really, to be honest, I didn't study this stuff before I became a Mason. So it's good stuff, even though some of it's not exactly what I believe now, but it's good stuff.
Here's something that I don't think I had heard before. He says in the year 1663, an assembly of the Freemasons of England was held at London, and the Earl of St. Albans was elected Grand Master.
Yes,
1663, they had a Grand Master because the Grand Lodge of England wasn't formed until 1717.
Yep.
right. That caught my eye as well, and I immediately thought of Pete Normand, and I should have called him to ask him, because he's all things authoritative on St. Albans, right?
Yeah,
But
well, Freemasonry in general, yeah.
but
Well, the guy's a walking
yeah,
encyclopedia.
he
The way,
is. I mean, talk about dates and times. He knows it.
Yeah.
well, the way he wrote this is this Grandmaster was elected. Basically, it kind of acts like he was elected to a lodge of operative masonry, operative masons, and that they, talked about the qualifications prescribed for candidates clearly allude to the speculative character of the institution.
Yeah.
Hmm.
All
Okay.
right, I'm going to read this. Um, I highlighted this too. I really like this paragraph. In tracing the progress of Freemasonry, we shall find it so intimately connected with the history of philosophy, of religion, and of art in all ages of the world that it is evident that no Mason can expect thoroughly to understand the nature of the institution or to appreciate its character unless he shall carefully study its annals and make himself conversant with the facts of history to which and from which it gives and receives mutual influence. The brother who unfortunately supposes that the only requisites of a skillful Mason consist in repeating with fluency the ordinary lectures, or in correctly opening and closing the lodge, or in giving with sufficient accuracy the modes of recognition, will hardly credit assertion that he whose knowledge of the royal art extends no farther than these preliminaries has scarcely advanced beyond the rudiments of our science.
God, I love
I read
that
that
that one that one
What
It's
chapter?
beautifully written, huh?
That was yes, that's exactly how I feel
Chapter
and how I
9.
felt for a long time.
Yeah, and that's another reason why we started our podcasts, and you too, is to talk about stuff other than just the ritualistic opening and closing and memorizing the catechism and all of that stuff. I mean, it's important because it's the
It's
stuff that we
absolutely
study.
important. Yes,
And
yes,
we've always said you need to be both a ritualist and a philosopher. But what he's saying is if you're just a ritualist and you don't look any further than rote memorization of the ritual, then you're not really going to understand the science of the craft.
yes.
And
In
he
in
believes it's a science.
in layman's terms, you have to be deeper than a soap dish.
Yeah.
that's that's what I get from that phrase or that point that he made. And when I saw that, I immediately loved the book. I knew I was in the right place when he said that.
Yeah.
That's
See,
the point.
that's when it
That's the
starts to
point
get
where he
good.
grabbed. Yeah, that's the point where he grabbed me. Was right there. I started paying attention at that point. My eyes had already glossed over before that. But when it starts getting into, I do like the discuss when he discussed the form of the lodge and a little bit about the officers of the lodge. That was pretty good. But I really loved the symbolism of Solomon's temple, where he flat out says it's all symbolic, man. It's all everything that has to do with Solomon's temple is symbolic of the self,
Yeah.
and not just physically, but emotionally and mentally, intellectually.
And that's in chapter 13. We're not quite there yet.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. But I
Is that
agree.
13 or 12?
You did say you didn't look at anything in the first 12 chapters.
Sorry, man.
That's okay. It's a long book, but we're already 60 pages in. So, chapter
Well,
11, the
I do like
speculative
this.
science and the operative art. This was interesting. He's talking about the Ark of the Covenant, the actual idea of an ark being borrowed from Egypt.
Yes.
I think that's probably pretty well known to most people by now.
Well, not only that, but the fact that it everything has a reason for happening. So when I think about the science of initiation, I think about the fact that certain things have to happen in a certain way to make the initiation meaningful, because ultimately you're stripping down and then building back up for proper initiation. And I think that when you're talking about this topic, that's the science of initiation is that it requires specific things to happen in a specific way to to create the impression it's supposed to.
This was interesting. He's talking about Josephus and the veils that were in the temple itself. And he says, according to Josephus, the veils were intended for symbolic instruction in their color and their materials. Collectively, they represented the four elements of the universe, and in passing, it may be observed that this notion of symbolizing the universe characterized all the ancient systems, both the true and the false, pure and spurious, and that the remains of the principle are to be found everywhere, even at this day, pervading Masonry, which is but a development of these systems. In the four veils of the tabernacle, the white or fine linen signified the earth from which flax was produced. The scarlet signified fire, appropriately represented by its flaming color. The purple typified the sea, in an allusion to the shellfish murex, from which the tint was obtained, and the blue the color of the firmament, which was emblematic of air. And he's saying that that is according to Josephus. I'm going to have to go get my book by Josephus and see if I could find that in there. 'Cause that's pretty interesting
Yeah,
that Josephus would describe the veils of the actual temple as representing the four ancient elements,
I
the
agree.
alchemical elements. That I think that's worthy of further investigation.
Yes, for sure.
Yep.
I latched onto that as well.
Okay, and then we're on chapter 12 and the symbolism of Solomon's temple, which I think is where you really kind of started to delve into it.
Yes, and I've already said my piece on it, but I'll reiterate it that every part from the foundation um to the sanctum sanctorum is representative of the spirit and our development of our spirit, or actually of our soul, because it's known to most of my friends that I truly believe that our soul is built from the intellect and the spirit of God, which is the spark within us that creates life. And I truly believe that that's how we develop our soul, is by working on both of those things. And when we can transform that, then we're ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of a trinity kind of permeates all the religions, right? From the Hindus to Christianity. And why wouldn't it apply to us as beings as well, where we have a material body and a mental intellect and a spiritual aspect? I mean, we're threefold beings. So
Well,
the trestle, and he
and
talks
so
about the
do
trestle board,
most
therefore
religions.
becomes one of our elementary symbols. For in the Masonic ritual, the speculative Mason is reminded that as the operative artist erects his temporal building in accordance with the rules and designs laid down on the trestle board of the master workman, so should he erect that spiritual building of which the material is a type, in obedience to the rules and designs, the precepts and commands laid down by the grand architect of the universe in those great books of nature and revelation, which constitute the spiritual trestle board of every Freemason. So, yeah, I mean, we've gone from operative Masons building actual physical temples to speculative Masons working on the temple, which is to house the Spirit of God, which is within us, right? And
Yeah,
and that a lot of the Protestant denominations will look at that and say, no, God does not live in his creation. He is separate from it. But St. Paul said, do you not know that you are temples of God and that God dwells within you? I mean,
yeah,
it can't be both.
I agree. I agree. I like um the last paragraph. Speculative masonry, which is but another name for Freemasonry in its modern act, act acceptation. Some of these words, man, they it just blows me away. In its modern acceptation, may be briefly defined as the scientific application and the religious consecration of the rules and principles, the languages, the implements, and materials of operative masonry to the veneration of God, the purification of the heart, and the inculcation of the dogmas of a religious philosophy. I really like that paragraph, because it all starts with it all starts and ends with the heart, right? Or what the heart represents.
Yeah. Even our work, right?
Yes. Yes.
In the ancient mysteries, the aspirant was not permitted to enter the sacred vestibule or take any part in the secret formula of initiation until by water or by fire he was emblematically purified. We present the aspirant with the lambskin apron, the gauge, and the gavel as symbols of a spiritual purification. So same thing. I mean, the EA degree is really a purification ceremony, preparing the guy to enter into a new life, an upgrade of himself.
Yes. That's the basis of the entered apprentice is preparation of the heart for what's coming.
Yeah, and there was something so interesting in here about the EA degree, and I'll get into it later. I think it was Mackey's interpretation of why he is in the northeast corner of the lodge at some point. And I had
Right.
never heard that interpretation before, and I thought it was so interesting that I used it as lodge education for my lodge up here last Monday.
Huh. Wow.
So, all
What
right,
at
he talks
the
about,
in chapter, what was that, like 16 or 17?
I don't know, we'll get there.
Okay.
Now he's talking about the working tools of the fellow craft, um, and what they represent. You know, the square, the plumb, the level.
Well, and here's the thing about this book that I like. And you and I, all three of us, we're very familiar with what these symbols mean. So a lot of this is kind of repetitive for what we're learning, right?
Yeah.
But the reason I chose this book, the main reason I chose this book was the main reason you have this show and I have my show, right? Because not everybody gets that information, and they need to know where these resources are for them to get that kind of information, because this helps them to really dive into the degrees, unlike they will within their lodges in most cases.
Well, and actually, it's kind of cool to look back at something written in 1869 and see the same description of the working tools um, presented 150 years ago as what we're receiving today. You know,
Yeah.
there's
And
very
he's
little
got
difference in the way he puts it.
right, but he's got an eloquent way of saying it.
Well, yeah.
There's
They
several
wrote
things.
a
He
lot
was
more
such a
eloquently.
he was such a great writer. I could only dream of writing like that. It's part, romance novel, part, educational piece.
Yeah, I'm not sure modern day audiences would appreciate if we wrote like this.
Well,
Probably
the
why
thing,
this is not a bestseller right now.
They would copy it and put it in AI to create a summary.
you know what? We all know that this book is, purely intellectual, but he does have a mystical part. And it looks to me like he purposely toned this down for probably some of the reasons that you said, Dennis, to make it easy for everybody to kind of stay connected to it all the way through.
Chapter 13 in the form of the lodge in the show on myth, magic, and masonry
Yeah.
talked
Mm-hmm.
about this idea of the Mediterranean being a representation of the lodge.
Mhm.
And we both thought that was just a ludicrous idea. And so did the author of that book. He was like, okay, well, I'm going to tell you about this theory, but not much to back it up. Well, here it is in Mackey's book. This
Yeah.
oblong square, thus enclosing the whole of what was then supposed to be the habitable globe, would precisely represent what is symbolically said to be the form of the lodge, where the pillars of Hercules in the west, on each side of the Straits of Gibraltar, might appropriately be referred to as the two pillars that stood at the porch of the temple. A Masonic lodge, therefore, is a symbol of the world. I think that's really far-fetched, and he was talking about the island of Crete being the altar where the sacred book of the law was deposited, and the master in the east being at Jerusalem. I don't think that's why our lodges were laid out the way that they were, especially if you look 2,000 years ago at Mithraeum in the Mithraic religion, and they were laid out the same exact way. I mean, we have more in common with that than we do the Mediterranean.
Yeah. I was still under the weather back when you guys did that book, but I read the whole book, and that part really kind of blew me away.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time trying to make it work out in my mind, and I couldn't get it.
I understand the concept though, that the thought the back then the world was not this what it is today. I don't think that most people realize that the world was much bigger than those areas.
Yeah.
I just unless you were a trader, you didn't travel to China. You didn't travel to Scotland or Europe or whatever. So I could see where the mass generation would see the world as being that specific area, because that was where most of trade happened.
Yeah, I'm not saying that they didn't consider that the whole world, but it's real easy to go back after the fact and say, oh, well, the Straits of Gibraltar are the two pillars at the entry porch to King Solomon's temple, and that's where he
Right.
derived them from because that was the end of the known world. I mean, this is all Monday morning quarterbacking, in my opinion.
Right. We do change our opinions over the years as we go through this journey. But I always wondered why the lodge was oblong. Because everything we do, I mean, all that's important really in the lodge is the circumambulation. That's the most important part about what's happening there, in my opinion.
Yeah, so why isn't the lodge a circle?
Right. So why isn't it oblonged? Why doesn't it look more like an oval, in my opinion?
Or the zodiac or something.
Right. Yes. Because that does make absolute sense. And when you go further, in the chapter later on, you get that mental picture when you're talking about circumambulation.
It's called Officers of a Lodge, and yet it's mostly about the initiation ceremonies of the Hindus, the Zoroastrians of Persia, the Celtic Druids, the mysteries of Eleusis, and he boils it all down again, third book in a row. The solar deity performed an important part. In reference to the sun, between the symbolism of Freemasonry and that of ancient rites and mysteries, to suggest for them a common origin, the sun being always in the former system from the earliest times of the primitive or patriarchal masonry. So he's supposedly talking about the officers of the lodge, but really what he's talking about is the solstices, the winter solstice and its rebirth, the sun's rebirth and eventual climbing to the summer solstice and the longest day, and then its deterioration again. So I don't know what that had to do with the officers of the lodge, but
Yeah. That led.
Is this not the chapter that mentioned the sun and the moon? And did it not mention that?
Well, that last paragraph, did you guys highlight that last paragraph?
well, read it. What is it?
But I need not multiply these instances of sun worship. Every country and religion of the ancient world would afford one. Sufficient has been cited to show the complete coincidence in reference to the sun between the symbolism of Freemasonry and that of the ancient rites and mysteries, and to suggest for them a common origin, the sun being always in the former system, from the earliest times of the primitive or patriarchal masonry, considered simply as a manifestation of wisdom, strength, and beauty of the divine art, visibly represented by the position of the three principal officers of a lodge, while by the latter in their degeneration from and corruption of the true Noachic faith, it was adopted the special object of adoration.
Okay, so there he's talking about the spurious Freemasons actually worshiping the sun and the pure Freemasons being descendants of Noah.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, and while I do not agree with that, I would, and because I do not agree with that, I would say, let's reference the sun, moon, and Mercury, in my opinion. I don't like to say the sun, moon, and worshipful master anymore. I think it should have always been the sun, moon, and Mercury. And
Yeah,
so
because the sun rising in the east, diffusing warmth and light to all, is the worshipful master. I mean, why would he be anything other than the sun?
Exactly. Well, and to be honest, we know it seems like I read in a book somewhere years ago, or maybe it wasn't years ago, talking about the sun, moon, and Mercury, and I think so that people know what I'm talking about. It has to do with the sun being the generative source and the moon being the reflective source, and then Mercury transformative in between that kind of combines the two, which there again it's very emblematical in my mind of the mind and conscience, creating your soul. I think that the mind is the creative, and the conscience is the reflective, and the soul is that transformative, that transformation that happens because of the two.
Okay, the next chapter is the point within the circle.
So are you going to tell Jason to cut that out or what?
No.
The way you just moved into the next chapter.
Well,
Didn't even say anything
I
about
agreed with what you said. I
Okay.
wasn't going to rephrase it in a different way.
Yeah.
We got a long way to go, but the point within the circle is a point of contention.
Yeah.
A point of contention. All right, let's do it.
Yeah, because we've talked about this symbol on numerous previous episodes,
Okay.
and I think the general consensus is that it's kind of a symbol.
Well, his interpretation of it is pretty interesting. I mean,
Well, read it.
He goes off the rails and connects it to phallus worship, for God's sake.
Yeah, that was interesting. I had not heard that before, but yeah, read that part.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. For those of you who don't know what phallus worship is, look it up, because it's a little bit too R-rated for this program. No, just kidding.
If they're watching this show, they know what it is.
Because of the couple of other podcasts that we had guys on talking about the point in the circle, kind of throws it out there. It says, but the days when the sun reaches these points are respectively the 21st of June and the 22nd of December, and this will account for their subsequent application to the two Saints John, whose anniversaries have been placed by the church near these days.
Right.
Yeah, near these days, the 24th of June and the 27th of December.
Well, if they put it right on, then it would be pagan worship. Dang it! Don't be trying to create pagans out of the church.
Well, according to Pete, when he was on, the days that were chosen for those respective feast days were actually quarter days in England, and
I've heard that as well.
I think that they became feast days for Masonry because the first quarter day was June 24th, and that was supposed to be the day of the Grand Lodge communication and the election of a new Grand Master and blah, 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 blah. And yet the guy that was the master at the time was a big cricket fan, I think is what it was. What is it?
He owned a cricket team.
Yeah. And so he didn't want to be gone during the season. So he moved the meeting day from June 24th to what was going to be essentially the other quarter day, which would have been Christmas. Well, they wouldn't have been happy having the meeting on Christmas, but there was another Saints John Day 2 days later, so he moved it to the other Saints John Day, and that's how the two Saints John became important to Freemasonry because this English guy didn't want to give up his cricket season.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, it was a holiday. It was a national holiday, actually.
Yeah.
That quarter day, that was a national holiday, and so nobody wanted to have it on the national holiday because of I guess it was cricket, but it was a national holiday at the time, from what I remember.
And Pete really has heartburn over the point within the circle and how it's defined. And so did Coyle. I mean, I've got Coyle's Masonic Encyclopedia, and he goes off on the point within the circle. But I had not heard the idea presented by Mackey about the phallic worship.
Yeah, that's the first I'd heard.
You have that highlighted? Now, this
Yeah.
hermaphrodism of the supreme divinity was again supposed to be represented by the sun, which was the male generative energy, and by nature or the universe, which was the female prolific principle. And this union was symbolized in different ways, but principally by the point within the circle. The point being the male or phallic energy, and the circle being the receptive or female principle. I thought
Man,
that was kind of interesting.
yes, I did too. I thought it was, but I still didn't think it was really representative of what was going on there. I think that the point is more in the lines of being like a sundial, and how the well, the in the beginning they thought it was the earth rotating around the sun rotating around the earth, but now it's the earth rotating around the sun. I mean, but
Yeah.
ultimately that we're talking about a full day when we talk about the rising of the east, the setting in the west, and going around to the darkest point in the north. I mean, that's nighttime. I mean,
That's the problem with that symbol. There's no clear explanation that can be agreed on by anybody. You got the parallel lines representing the Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn in the monitor, and the sun's movement over the course of the year from north to south. Or you've got the two parallel lines representing the two Saints John and the summer and winter solstice, which aren't really the summer and winter solstice. Or you've got the compass with the point in the center and the drawing of the circle around it, and that's supposed to be uh, emblematic of not going beyond your. I mean, you know the deal.
right.
And then, like you said, the sun going around the earth, and now the earth going around the sun, and then it's God and man, and I mean, there's explanation after explanation after explanation, which is why nobody likes the point within the circle.
Well, but think about it this way. I mean, if you think about it, and he states it in one of these chapters, and I don't know which one he states it in, but he talks about the fact that, symbols mean certain things, but they can also mean other things. And so there can be multiple thoughts on this based on, where you lived, and what your influences were. I mean, that's going to create different thoughts. I mean, that's so.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt that everything has multiple explanations and multiple interpretations. It just seems a little out there, a little wild that he would be, intellectually writing this book intellectually, and normal baseline explanations of the symbolism, and then boom, go right into phallus worship, when there's so many other baseline standard explanations.
He was eating mushrooms that night instead of drinking scotch, I think.
Maybe this is one of the reasons why he introduced Freemasonry as two branches, pure and spurious, so that he could categorize all of the things that he considered weird as spurious Freemasonry that he doesn't necessarily agree with, and he's the pure Freemasonry guy.
You know, you say he didn't agree with it, but he agreed with it enough to put it in the book. So
Well,
it
yeah,
was on his mind.
yeah. And you can see that in the next chapter when he's talking about the theological or mystical ladder of Freemasonry, because he's talking about how the mysteries of Mithras had it, the mysteries of Brahma had it, the Scandinavian mysteries had it.
Yes.
Um, I mean, he just goes on and on and on about all these other organizations that had this mystical ladder. Hmm.
And it says, now St. Paul explains charity is signifying not almsgiving, which is the modern popular meaning, but love. That love
Yes.
suffereth long and is kind. And when in our lectures on this subject, we speak of it as the greatest of virtues, because when faith is lost and hope has ceased, it extends beyond the grave to the realms of endless bliss, as we refer to it, to the divine love of our Creator. But Portal, in his essay on symbolic colors, informs us that the sun represents divine love and gold indicates the goddess of good, the goodness of God. So that's one that we've all
Yeah.
harped on.
What page was that? Because I really liked that, and
67.
that part where he talked about the different colors, or
Yeah,
the different metals and the different colors.
right. 67, page 67.
Yeah, that was I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, the rite of discalciation is simply the uncovering of the feet when approaching holy ground.
Right, but that's part of the initial tearing down of the self. You know, if you think about it, I don't know how many people have ever looked at 12-step programs of this 30s and 40s back then. You know, those were, I think they were all created by Masons, as a matter of fact. But all of those programs and even transformative steps that you would take in psychology or in a therapeutic way is tearing down of the self or the ego, and then building it back up. And so I think there's something to it, and that is the science of ritual, is the tearing down and building back up. I had mentioned it before, and I think it's important to mention that, because we see it represented in so many different successful ways of dealing with the transformation of self. I mean, when anybody is going through a hard situation, the first thing you do is break it down to the nuts and bolts of it, and then build it back up.
It's an indication of humility and reverence, right? I mean, it's placing you in a position of vulnerability. So,
That's the key word right there, vulnerability.
Yes.
and then you've got the rite of investiture, which is just clothing somebody with something. And in Freemasonry, obviously, it's the lambskin apron. And he talks about the importance of what it's made out of and why it's white.
Yes, because it represents purity.
Things like the Essenes and the Scandinavian rites and the
Yes.
school of Pythagoras. They all had some sort of rite of investiture, and it was almost always some piece of clothing that was white.
Right. Right.
It was a
And
white
it's
robe or a white girdle or
yes, it's the Hindustan 9 strands. I guess the 9 strands of the Hindus. I hadn't heard it as Hindustan before.
Hindustan is what they used to call India. Yeah.
Oh, is it? Huh. I'll see. You learn something new every day. See, guys,
You know,
that's why y'all are watching the show.
I had read a long time ago that one of the symbolic interpretations of the apron, along with being a symbol of innocence and purity and all of that stuff, but it was also signified a protection, like a shield from
Yes.
from outside trouble. And I didn't see him. I remember
He did mention that because well,
allude to that.
he did allude to it in a way by talking about Aaron going into the Holy of Holies and putting on the white apron. But he said that it represented the sinless nature of the people. But I don't think that that's what it was. I think it was more for representing purity or protection. And it was the Romans, or was it not the Romans, but one of the people that he mentioned created a white shield. They specifically created a white shield. I need to get back to that chapter because I put down my book and it flipped on me. Sorry. But I like that. I enjoyed reading all those different references because I didn't know all of them. I knew about some of them, but I didn't know about all of them.
It's a good thought to sit there and listen to how that apron is a symbol of purity and innocence and all that stuff, and then to also say that it's also a protection. It also is a protection, and I think that's kind of cool.
Well, and I think it was the Scandinavian rites, and I think what he was trying to allude to was that these were all ritualistic moments where they intentionally invested them with this ritualistic white apron, shield, whatever, in becoming, like, if you're becoming if you're joining the Scandinavian rites, then that's part of their investiture is the white shield. If you're, being initiated into Hindustan, then that's part of their ritual. And there are certain meanings behind each strand as well. That was pretty cool. But they call it a girdle. He called it a girdle, and I saw that in some other research that I was doing as well, that they called it a girdle more than an apron.
This was interesting. The symbolism of the gloves, right? Because we don't get gloves. I mean, some of us buy gloves and wear them to traditional observance activities. But
I have gloves. I give gloves with every case that I sell.
I know, but they're not part of the ritual.
Right. Well, they are. They are in the third degree, and we don't wear them in our. That was something that was removed when they came to America.
Right. I know
Americans,
the fellow crafts are clothed in white gloves and aprons, but
yes,
we don't give. We give an apron, but we don't give him a pair of gloves.
Right.
But they do in continental Europe.
Yes, and I think
I thought that was really interesting. And
yes.
the thing that I thought was the most interesting was the gloves given to the candidate for himself are intended to teach him that the acts of a Mason spotless as now given to him. And in the German lodges, the word used for acts is Handlungen or handlings, the works of his hands, which makes the symbolic idea even more impressive.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
actions. Yes.
Says up there, the apron may be said to refer to the pure heart and the gloves to the clean hands.
I think that's really cool. And I am a little bit sad that we don't do that here.
Exactly. So when they say, here we are in white gloves, then
in
that's
token
what
of
it
our
represents.
Innocence, right?
Yeah, we have done no wrong. We have done nothing. Our actions show no fault. I like that.
Okay, circumambulation.
Okay, I like this one.
Yeah, well, and you can look at any of the ancient initiatic ceremonies, and almost all of them have some form of circumambulation, and they all follow the path of the sun.
Yep.
From east to west by way of the south. And
I thought it was interesting how the Greeks, do a hymn as they go around
Yeah, the chanting of "We imitate the example of the sun and follow his benevolent course." Here again, we have in Masonry that old and often repeated allusion to sun worship, which has already been seen in the officers of the lodge and in the point within the circle. And as the circumambulation is made around the lodge, just as the sun was supposed to move around the earth, we are brought back to the original symbolism with which we commenced, that the lodge is a symbol of the world. And that's how he ends that chapter. Third book in a row that alludes to
Or the universe.
solar worship and
Yeah.
the symbolism therein.
Have you ever considered it being the universe and not just the world?
The lodge, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Universe.
Yeah, it's a
that's how I
macrocosm
see it
and a
more.
microcosm. It's also a representative of you.
Yes. Well, of course, I know that part.
And each
But
officer in it is a representation of some aspect of yourself.
Yes. Well, I like that, and that's what it made me think of when I was reading it, and that's why I like circumambulation so much, because it's very important that people look into what they're doing there, and you could even go into Kabbalistic nature of that.
All right. The rite of entrusting and the symbolism of light.
Oh, yes. That's what it is. It's that sacraliation or whatever, discalciation, and then the investiture, and then the entrusting. So the final part of ritual, you're tearing down, you've got your building up, and then you've got the explanation of why it was done the way it was done. I love a lot said light in that chapter, but I think that's one of the other points to where he mentions the fact that we have these lectures of symbolism. It's laid out for you, but you still have to dig deeper into what it means.
It's just sad that it gets passed by so fast, and there's no follow up or anything to it to give somebody a jump start on thinking the way that they should be thinking after this. It's bam, 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 and it's over with, and that's it. And it's sad because I don't know where it was in here, but the guys are become Masons early in their life, but they don't really start thinking about what it's all about until later in their life. And that's sad. Very sad.
I mean, what do you suppose if you go through the ceremonies and you care enough to memorize the catechism and get past to the degree of fellowcraft and then ultimately become a master Mason, you're asking for something at the altar in each one of these initiatic experiences. And for those guys that don't pursue additional study, what do they think that represented? I mean, he says light was, in accordance with this old religious sentiment, the great object of attainment in all the ancient religious mysteries. It was there and is now in Masonry made the symbol of truth and knowledge. Mason craves an intellectual illumination which will dispel the darkness of mental and moral ignorance and bring to his view as an eyewitness the sublime truths of religion, philosophy, and science, which it is the great design of Freemasonry to teach. And yet, how many learn it?
No.
How many lodges actually teach it? I mean,
well,
most
where it's
lodges, sadly, are just involved in the paying of the bills and the reading of the minutes and the eating of spaghetti on paper plates and watered down iced tea.
It's easy to think that that it's so simple that when the blindfold comes off, that's your light, and to totally forget about it beyond there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's so simplistic, but it's the way people think a lot.
Okay, Chris, um, this next chapter is the symbolism of the cornerstone, and this is the one where he provides an explanation of the northeast corner that I had not heard before. And I think it's really interesting. So I'm going to read the paragraph, if you guys don't mind,
Yeah,
and then
go
get
ahead.
your take on it. So he says, now the spiritual cornerstone is deposited in the northeast corner of the lodge because it is symbolic of the position of the neophyte or candidate who represents it in his relation to the order and to the world. From the profane world he has just emerged. Some of its imperfections are still upon him. Some of its darkness is still about him. He as yet belongs in part to the north, which he calls the place of darkness, right? But he is striving for light and truth. The pathway upon which he has entered is directed towards the east. His allegiance, if I may use the word, is divided. He is not altogether a profane, nor altogether a Mason. If he were wholly in the world, the north would be the place to find him, the north, which is the reign of darkness. If he were wholly in the order, a master mason, the east would have received him, the east, which is the place of light. But he is neither. He is an apprentice, with some of the ignorance of the world cleaving to him, and some of the light of the order beaming upon him. And hence this divided allegiance, this double character, this mingling of the departing darkness of the north with the approaching brightness of the east, is well expressed in our symbolism by the appropriate position of the spiritual cornerstone in the northeast corner of the lodge. One surface of the stone faces the north, and the other surface faces the east. It is neither wholly in one part nor wholly in the other, and insofar as it is a symbol of initiation not fully developed, that which is incomplete and imperfect, and is therefore fitly represented by the recipient of the first degree at the very moment of his initiation.
Yeah.
I have never heard that before.
How could you read this book and not highlight that paragraph?
Right?
I had it
Yeah.
too.
I mean, you've all heard the explanation. You know, it's customary that the first stone of the building be placed there because, you know, you're in the northern hemisphere. The sun comes up in the east and shines first light on the northeast corner, and that's where they start the building, and everything is kind of centered around it. So he's placed there as a representation of the first stone of his own spiritual temple, right? And that's the explanation we get.
I actually liked it
Much
better,
better. It's
to be
more-
honest
I
with
mean,
you.
and it can be both, right? It can be
Yeah.
both.
It's so easy to understand. I mean, it is. It's the best.
Yeah, go
It's
ahead.
kind of like the thing that I've got a heartburn about in the Scottish Rite Fellowcraft degree versus the Blue Lodge Fellowcraft degree at the altar. I mean, it just, you know, they rattle off some gobbledygook that doesn't mean a dang thing, and yet in the Scottish Rite version of it, it tells you exactly what it means. You know?
Yeah.
Yes. This is one of those moments where one of those moments of clarity where I go back to we learn as we go, and I have a presentation that I wrote that I actually stated the northeast corner. In the northeast corner, it's darkest before the dawn, and that in that moment, the reason why we are spotless is because we haven't, started our travels yet. And I was totally wrong. I have to go and rewrite that presentation because of that paragraph, and I'm glad. But I wrote it probably 3 years ago, and this is one of those moments to where I have to go back, and this is part of the reason I haven't done my book yet, because I keep learning. I'm still learning too much I don't want to look like an idiot when I publish the book, and then, everybody knows how inept I am.
But
I've written plenty of stuff I don't agree with anymore.
It's cool to have something like this that pops into your brain, and you go, "Oh my gosh!"
Yes. And I feel like I'm still so, when something like this happens, it reminds you and it humbles you to know that, you just don't get it yet. There's still plenty more out there to get.
Right. There's that it goes deeper and deep. It's like that program that Mike Gower gives that just blew me away. It's
It's
called
deeper than that.
Than That.
Yeah.
You know, just
Yes.
blows me away. You know, and it is. That's great analogy. You know.
All
I
right.
agree.
The next chapter is the ineffable name.
Yeah, that's one that people just need to read, that
Yeah.
Masons just need to read, because we can get into that. That can be a whole show in itself.
Yeah. This
Trying to explain the tetragrammaton and
yeah. Yeah.
Well, and then here in that, he talks about the symbol of universal nature among the Egyptians was the right angled triangle, of which the perpendicular side represented Osiris, or the male principle, the base Isis, or the female principle, and the hypotenuse, their offspring Horus, or the world emanating from the union of both principles. All of this, of course, is nothing more nor less than the phallus and the Citius or lingam and yani under a different form. There he goes again.
Yeah.
yeah. Yes.
I like the
But
part where he's talking about the letter G, and he says, in my own opinion, the letter G, which is used in the fellowcraft's degree, should never have been permitted to intrude into Masonry. It presents an instance of absurd anachronism which would never have occurred in the original Hebrew school if the original Hebrew symbol had been retained. The Yud, I think, is what he's
well,
talking about.
yeah, you see
Yeah.
what I've moved to, and I actually, my newest apron case is like that, my personal one.
Oh, I need a new shirt, huh?
I know Justin had created that one. When it was my turn, we got a little bit more detailed. But one thing I can say, and that's really important for a young Mason to understand, is that when we're discussing the ritual and we're discussing Aaron, and we think about the fact that we're working on our temple, and our temple represents the tabernacle, and sure, this is still, we got to remember, it's still symbolic, but the importance of that word and the ineffable name of God is that once a year, the high priest would go into the Holy of Holies, clothed properly, nothing but white, with the white apron and everything else, with a rope tied around his ankle in case he wasn't pure enough to go in front of the Holy of Holies and speak the ineffable name, the name that we no longer know. And so that's the importance of the ineffable name within not only Freemasonry, but the whole basis of the Bible, and or at least the history of God, when it comes to the story of Aaron and Moses, and where it went from there.
Did you highlight the last paragraph of the ineffable name chapter?
I did not, but go ahead and read it.
And now, after all, is there not in this whole prevalence of the name of God in so many different symbols throughout the Masonic system something more than a mere evidence of the religious proclivities of the institution? Is there not behind this a more profound symbolism which constitutes, in fact, the very essence of Freemasonry? The names of God, said a learned theologian at the beginning of this century, were intended to communicate the knowledge of God himself. By these, men were enabled to receive some scanty ideas of his essential majesty goodness, and power, and to know both whom we are to believe and what we are to believe of him. And this train of thought is eminently applicable to the admission of the name into the system of Masonry. With us, the name of God, however expressed, is a symbol of divine truth, which it should be the incessant labor of a Mason to seek. That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
And
I
that's
like that.
foreshadowing, because divine truth is all caps right there.
Yep.
And he refers to it again in a couple of the ending chapters
Yeah, he
Yes.
does.
as the sole purpose of
Right.
Masonry.
In
The
the
seeking of the truth is the divine truth.
right, the
Yes.
explanation of Masonic work and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, the lost word.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next chapter, chapter 25, the legends of Freemasonry. I have a couple of things highlighted in there, but I'm going to skip to the last paragraph.
Yes, go ahead.
I've got
I
it
have
starred. So, without its symbols and its myths or legends and the ideas and conceptions which lie at the bottom of them, the time, the labor, and the expense incurred in perpetuating the institution would be thrown away. Without them, it would be a vain and empty show. Its scripts and signs are worth nothing except for social purposes, as mere means of recognition. So too would be its words, were it not that they are, for the most part, symbolic. Its social habits and its charities are but incidental points in its constitution. Of themselves good, it is true, but capable of being attained in a simpler way. Its true value, as a science, consists in its symbolism, in the great lessons of divine truth which it teaches, and in the admirable manner in which it accomplishes that teaching. Everyone, therefore, who desires to be a skillful Mason must not suppose that the task is accomplished by a perfect knowledge of the mere phraseology of the ritual, by a readiness in opening and closing a lodge, nor by an offhand capacity to confer degrees. All these are good in their places, but without the internal meaning they are but mere child's play. He must study the myths, the traditions, and the symbols of the order and learn their true interpretation, for this alone constitutes the science and the philosophy, the end, aim, and desire of speculative Masonry.
very well. Yeah, very
He
good.
could have ended the book right there and I'd have been happy.
That would have
Yes.
been that would have done it for me.
I agree. I agree. While you were reading that, I started reflecting again on the fact that it's a science, and he states right there that it's not just what you know, but the method in which you know it,
Exactly.
or learn it. And while you were reading that, I was thinking about the hero's journey. And the hero has all these different attributes. They're bold, they protect the weak, they do all kinds of different things, right? The hero in your mind. But if he doesn't go through the journey, he'll never become the actual hero. We all have these certain, or can grasp these certain attributes, but until we put them into practice in the journey, we can't become the hero.
And I know Robert Park says that a lot. We get so deep into the philosophy of it that we forget the actual practice of it.
It kind of relates to your the journey, the top of the mountains, to say whether you get put there by a helicopter or you walk to the top of it, but what's more worth it?
Yeah.
The journey.
Which one's worth more? Yeah.
Exactly. I agree.
Okay, and then the next chapter is the legend of the winding stairs, which he talks a little bit about the winding stairs, but he starts to talk about the word.
Right. I agree. He got a little sidetracked on this one, I think.
Yeah. But then he kind of wraps it up in the last paragraph, because he's talking about the winding stairs and what the ultimate goal is, which is divine truth, right?
Right.
Represented by
So
the word. And so he says the pictorial representation of an ascent by a winding staircase to the place where the wages of labor were to be received was an allegory to teach us of the ascent of the mind from ignorance through all the toils of study and the difficulties of obtaining knowledge, receiving here a little and there a little, adding something to the stock of our ideas at each step, until in the middle chamber of life, in the full fruition of manhood, the reward is attained, and the purified and elevated intellect is invested with the reward in the direction how to seek God and God's truth. To believe this is to believe and to know the true design of speculative masonry, the only design which makes it worthy of a good or wise man's study.
so in essence, the journey that we just talked about.
Yeah.
And now for a little more context also, we messed up on leaving out in the chapter on the light. Mackey discusses the fact that the dark has not just been evil, represented as evil, but as ignorance.
Yeah.
And the light is not just represented as good, but as truth. And so it's that journey from darkness to light. That's the whole purpose of initiation. That in initiation, we're in the dark, which again goes back to that northeast corner. And then, through the journey, we receive the light. That's the only way we receive the light. It's not through just initiation, it's through the journey.
Let me ask y'all a question. And I've thought about this a whole bunch of times, but I never actually brought it up to anybody else. I'm thinking about, and of course I'm not going to say it, but I'm thinking about the third section of the master's degree. What is the difference between going through it without knowing anything about what you're going through, or being told that this is an allegory about such and such, and then you go through it where your mind is actually seeing and putting yourself in that situation and having an emotional reaction to it?
My first thought is like what he was talking about the science of the initiation, the initiatic experience of going through it first and then receiving the lecture afterwards, and thus explaining it.
But
because it's like having that reference of recall. When you hear something, you can recall it and it sticks with you a little bit better in the way that I think. I think that's why there's the science that it is. I mean, you could be onto something.
Well, I don't mean laying the whole thing out, but just get on a kind of an inkling of that you're going through something really special and important here, to get their mind thinking in that direction. I don't know. I've always often thought that way, because I remember mine, and the guy that gave the lecture did not do a good job in the lecture, and I had no clue whatsoever.
Well,
No.
I don't think the lecture explains in any satisfactory way what the legend is supposed to teach you.
Agreed.
I don't think so either.
There's two things.
But are we just talking about the lecture, really, or are we talking about like us reading books and all that, and then going back to recall?
That's what I was going to say. You and I have had this discussion before, Chris, about Freemasonry being the only place where you get your degree before you earn it, right? Well,
Right.
how do you earn it? Well, you don't earn it by being told. You earn it by finding out. And this was the argument that we used to have with officer leadership training. There was this view that if you told them 3 times, it was more likely that they would remember it. And my argument was if you led them to the conclusion and they came to it on their own, they would
Yeah.
learn it forever.
Right.
And it's so easy to just tell them, okay, this is an allegory and it means blah blah blah. But are they going to remember that? Or are they going to place a very much importance on it? Or if they love masonry and the study of masonry and discover it for themselves, then it means that much more. It's the climb to the mountain again. And it's not for everybody. I mean, a lot of guys that become Freemasons do it for, the fellowship or the charitable aspects or whatever. And it's a big tent, like David Hill says. But for those of us who want to explore it further, then the pathway is there, but it certainly isn't spoon fed to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
On what you're saying, what I was thinking about when you were talking about it, I was thinking about the difference between today kids in school are taught they're taught to the test, right? So they're taught to just learn the answers. They're not taught on how to get to that answer necessarily. I think it's changing a little bit now because I think it was more that was more prominent 10 years ago, but we have become our schools have taught that way. And I think that there's some people that find accomplishment within being able to pass that test. But there's other people that don't find the same sense of accomplishment by just passing the test. People like me, I'm more drawn in by the understanding or the comprehension of what's being taught as opposed to just learning the answers of the test. So there's no way I wasn't a very good student because I wasn't good at learning to the test. I was better at understanding or just the comprehension of it all.
So the next chapter is the legend of the third degree, which we just kind of hit on. And he breaks it down between spurious and pure Freemasonry, and then brings in Christian Masonry.
Yeah, he pretty much associated it pretty definitively with the Christian story.
Well, but he prefaces it with, that description is what the Christian Masons believe. But I think he probably counts himself in that camp, which is fine. I mean,
that was American.
At that time,
that was America back then. Yeah. It was all about Christianity, really.
So I'm going to skip that chapter.
Yeah, just that he was thinking other thoughts besides Christianity was impressive.
So then the next chapter is the sprig of acacia and the symbolism of sacred plants, and he goes through a bunch of different mystery schools and ancient religions that had their own version of a sacred plant and what each one of them meant. The Egyptians had erica, the Druids had mistletoe, the Brahmins had lotus, the Egyptians had lotus. The mysteries of Adonis had lettuce, of all things. Lettuce. But we have acacia, and there's religious or biblical reasons for acacia, and then there's other reasons for acacia. If you've read P.D. Newman's books,
I was going to say, wasn't there a psychedelic?
Well, yeah, that's what I'm referring to. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and the Druids had the mistletoe.
Yeah.
Right. But
angels in the vermilion and alchemically stone. P.D. Newman's books, fabulous reads.
I'm going to have to read. I haven't read that yet.
Yeah, he presented at one of our groups, and I just love the guy. I think he's super. He's out of Mississippi, and Just a
Yeah,
really
I'd,
good
I'd
guy.
like to hear
I'd like
about
to
that
have
for
him
sure.
on sometime. I want to review one of his books with him. Okay.
Whichever one has that in it, because I want to hear about that.
Okay. Alchemically stoned. Alchemically
Yes.
stoned is that one.
Yes, I want to hear about that.
The symbolism of labor can be boiled down into labor is worship. And he gets into more specifics. Um, he did say something in that chapter that I had not heard before. Traveling Freemasons, whether led into the error, if error it be, by a mistaken reading of history or by a superstitious reverence for tradition, always esteemed King Solomon as the founder of their order. And he's talking about operative medieval stonemasons, revering or esteeming King Solomon as the founder of their order. I had not heard that, and I'm not sure that's true because there, in again, in talking to Pete, there were lodges of St. John, there were lodges of St. Stephen, there were lodges of St. Alban. I have not heard of any lodges of Solomon in the operative guild. So I don't know where he's getting that from. Maybe he's right, and I just never heard it before, but
I never
seemed
heard of it.
seemed a little out there.
I've heard that same concept before, but I never did believe it.
He does talk about Swedenborg and the Hermetic philosophers, the French Masons, Eliphas Levi. Um, this was an interesting chapter, one worth reading, but I didn't highlight a lot because some of the stuff I didn't want to talk about.
Yeah, and I think this is another one of those chapters where it's worth reading because it gives you gives you rabbit holes to go down. And I think there's value in that. That, there's for the young Mason that doesn't know where Freemasonry can take them, there's value in touching on these things.
So we got two more chapters. We're almost there, guys.
Yep.
Jason's got a lot of editing to do.
Yes, he does.
So this one is the Stone of Foundation. The Stone of Foundation is supposed by the theory which establishes it to have been a stone placed at one time within the foundations of the Temple of Solomon, and afterwards, during the building of the second temple, transported to the Holy of Holies. It was in the form of a perfect cube and had inscribed upon its upper face, within a delta or triangle, the sacred tetragrammaton or ineffable name of God. And then he goes on to describe the various theories around the foundation stone, including Enoch and the descent through the nine chambers.
Yep.
Um,
13th
the
degree, guys, right there.
I
yeah,
know
the 13th
I
degree, the
fell right
Scottish
into the
Rite,
Scottish Rite. Yes.
the Royal Arch degree.
Yep.
But he also talks about the stone on which Jacob laid his head, and then the stone that is underneath the throne where the king is crowned in
Yes.
England or Scotland.
And I've heard about that before, but I hadn't heard it, put together like that before. So that's a rabbit hole that I'd like to go down and just
And then all of
see
these
where it goes.
all these ancient representations of deity as a stone before they could actually carve images. Um, that was interesting. The great object of all Masonic labor is divine truth. The search for the lost word is the search for truth, but divine truth is a term synonymous with God. The ineffable name is a symbol of truth because God and God alone is truth. And that is alluding to the next chapter, but is important in this chapter because it's engraved on the stone of the foundation stone, right? The cubical stone on the triangle.
Mm-hmm.
And then he starts talking about the lost word, and of course, we just did the podcast about the lost word found. So there's several different
Has that one
the lost word.
been published?
Yeah, it's out there.
Lost. Okay, I need to watch that.
That was several episodes ago. But the lost word is the last chapter, and according to Mackey, and a lot of guys think that this is secret and that people are supposed to discover it for themselves. But according to Mackey, the lost word is divine truth. That's the lost word.
Yeah.
What then is the design of Freemasonry? A very large majority of its disciples looking only to its practical results as seen in the everyday business of life, to the noble charities which it dispenses, to the tears of the widows which it has dried, to the cries of the orphans which it has hushed, to the wants of the destitute which it has supplied, arrive with too much rapidity at the conclusion that charity, and that too in its least exalted sense of eleemosynary aid, is the great design of the institution. Others will with a still more contracted view, remembering the pleasant reunions at their lodge banquets, the unreserved communications which are encouraged, and the solemn obligations of mutual trust and confidence that are continually inculcated, believe that it is intended to solely promote the social sentiments and cement the bonds of friendships. But although the modern lectures inform us that brotherly love and relief are two of the principal tenets of a Mason's profession, yet from the same authority we learn that truth is the third and not least important one. So what is Freemasonry? Then it is the search. It is the science which is engaged for the search after divine truth. Divine truth. That's the lost word.
And not the divine truth, but our divine truth.
Yeah. It also says you're not going to find it in this lifetime.
That's why there's a substitute word.
Yes. That's why there's a substitute word. Okay,
Well,
Dennis.
I think that you're welcome. Gave you plenty of stuff here to talk about, but
this is going to be our first 2-hour episode.
You knew it was coming. You knew it was coming when you asked me to jump on the show. But
you need to also say something, Dennis, about the synoptical index, because there's some good stuff in there, as well as that top 25 historical events. I mean, we're not going to go through those, but that's something that's an interesting part of the book.
Yeah, it absolutely is. That's one thing that I love about this, and it's an introductory to Mackey's Encyclopedia of Freemasonry. If anyone has ever seen or heard of those books, it's the synoptical. Is that what it's called? Synoptical?
Synoptical index.
Yes, the synoptical index is a mini version of that. So if you want to know the value of those books that are sitting in your lodge that somebody donated at some point when they passed away to the lodge, then look at that synoptical index and then go buy that set from your lodge and put it on your shelf, because I can't tell you how many presentations. Yeah, I can't tell you how many presentations that I've written and I've referenced my Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, because it's so important to have that kind of reference in your repertoire. And then the historical mentions in the back, that was added by the publisher of mine and Chris's version. I don't know if it's in Brad's version or not, but
it's not in this one.
But it's in our version. It has that in the back of it, and it's pretty interesting because it shows you different things that were happening in the last couple of centuries that had to do with the freedom of speech, religion, and all the things that have occurred, especially in America. You see those things, how Freemasonry has definitely influenced some of the things that have happened, in my opinion, especially when you think about, like in Texas, every city was built by Freemasons. That was one of the first buildings of the city. And so that was a big part of our history. And so having that is important. But I wanted to go back just real quick on that last chapter. The last thought that I have, we don't need to reference anything, was like I had stated earlier, that it all begins and ends with the heart. When I'm reading about the foundation, I'm thinking that, or when I'm reading about the lost word, I'm thinking it's right there. And when I'm thinking about that cubicle stone and what's within that cubicle stone, it's right there. It's within me already. And I just have to unveil it. And that's
and that's the catabasis of Freemasonry. It's the descent into yourself.
yes, and how to get there.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at the degrees of the Scottish Rite and the York Rite and say, yeah, you go through these arches and you discover the stone in the name of God. Well, it's all representative of an inner journey. And
yes,
and you're discovering that spiritual part within you that will never, never, never die, right?
And you know what's scary is there's too many men, when they realize that it's an individual journey, that you have to do it by yourself on your own. A lot of guys can't do that. They just can't make that. They can't make that trip.
Well, that's because it challenges everything that we've been taught, though, right?
Well, it's that, and it's facing the darker aspects of yourself and admitting that they're there. It's the checkered pavement of your own life that you're examining, and to admit to yourself that you have those dark tendencies and accepting that is the first step in correcting that. So a lot of people are hesitant, scared, refusing to even acknowledge that part of themselves. So
They don't want to go there. They just do not want to go there.
Well,
Maybe.
that's because when you accept it, sometimes you get lost in it.
Well,
And I went through that journey myself and had to get back out on the other side. It was tough.
no, I get that.
But
Acknowledging that it was there or that it exists doesn't mean that you continue it. It means that you know
right.
to stop it.
Right.
And a lot of guys are at the stage in their life death cycles that they're not ready for it yet. They're just not ready.
Yeah. But I think, going back to what you had stated earlier about, being told what you're supposed to learn before you learn it, I think that's the reason, is because Freemasonry is just the roadmap. We've got to take the road.
Yeah.
It's the road less traveled, and we've got to take it.
Yeah. And what I was trying to allude to is something similar to the chamber of reflection.
Well, I get it. Yes, I definitely get it.
Yeah, I don't want to take the opportunity to learn away, but to focus the mind a little more, instead of listening for something that has no meaning at all. But I don't know. I just know that if I knew that I was representing, going through a golly, you can't say it, going through a certain kind of a situation there, I might have been more tuned in to what was happening. I know I'm not doing it very well, but
you're supposed to be more tuned in anyways. That's the whole reason why you lose.
I think the majority of people that are watching this show know what you're talking about. So.
Right. That's funny.
If they don't, then why are they watching the show?
they need to walk down to their.
All right. So, Dennis, our rating scale is 1 to 10 white balls or a black ball, and you can use decimals. So, on a rating scale of 1 to 10 white balls, what do you give this book?
I would definitely give it an 8, a solid 8.
Why?
Because the only reason that I give it an 8 is because, and maybe I shouldn't, is because of half the book. I felt like we were just building up to, he was justifying how he was getting to the ideas that he was getting to. Half the book was, like I said earlier, it was going through the lineage every time you read a chapter in the Bible. That was the only reason. I personally am not the type to take offense to someone writing a book or a paper on based off of their own experience or their personal beliefs, because it's their beliefs that shaped those thoughts to begin with. So I can't condemn, if he, it felt like it was, I can't even remember the word, spurious. I can't condemn that.
And pure, yeah.
Yeah, I personally can't condemn that. I mean, what he called spurious versus pure, yeah, some of that was uncalled for, or not what I believe personally. But overall, I think it's a good book to learn and to challenge the mind to go down rabbit holes. And if there's anything we need to do when we're looking for a book, it's look for something that challenges us to go down rabbit holes.
Yeah. Good.
Okay, I'm going to give it, I'm right there with you. I'm going to give it a little bit higher rating because I think it's an important part of Masonic history. I mean, Albert Mackey is one of the greats, right? I mean, he's one of the people we turn to when we have questions. So I'm going to give it 8.5. Everybody ought to have this and his Encyclopedia of Freemasonry on their shelf. I mean, it should be a given, right?
That's right.
So yeah, 8.5 means get it, read it, agree with some of it, disagree with some of it, but it's great source material. It's great reference. It's definitely worth having. What do you think, Chris?
I gotta tell you, I think that this book, every Mason ought to read this book, and he ought to read it with an open mind, because there are things that are confusing in it. No matter, I mean, I've been a Mason for how long I've been a Mason, and I was confused a couple of times, and that confusion brought the score down a little bit for me. And I thought, who the hell am I to try to put a
Great
score?
Albert Mackey.
Yes, I feel like such an right now.
And,
Giving him an 8.
But because of my confusion, spurious and the phallic worship and all that stuff, which didn't really jive with me, with the flow of where we were going. I'm going to have to agree with you, Brad. 8.5 is about as high as I can go, but I did a lot of research on the side on this book. When I got to certain places, I really researched that spurious Freemasonry, and basically it finally told me to shut up and just take it for what it was worth. It's not, it's not the deep, dark secret that you think it is, and all that. So 8.5, I enjoyed the book. I still hate Dennis for picking it, but I enjoyed the book anyway. But I think everybody ought to have it. I agree with you, Brad. They ought to have it for sure. But you compare this book with Pike and Manly P. Hall, wow. You get some, there's definite distinctive differences in all three styles. Mackey's intellectual, Pike is philosophical, and Hall is mystical, and it's pretty evident. But it was really cool to do that little bit of research. But yeah,
That's a great trinity there.
Yeah,
yes,
Mackey, Pike, and Hall. That's
trinity.
Great.
Yes, that's the perfect trinity.
like a music group, doesn't it? Manly
Yeah.
Hall.
That's funny.
All right. As we wrap up our discussion of the symbolism of Freemasonry, it's worth remembering what makes works like this endure. Mackey wasn't just cataloging symbols, he was trying to articulate the deeper language of the craft. Whether every historical claim holds up under modern scholarship is almost beside the point. What Mackey gave generations of Masons was a framework for thinking symbolically, for looking beyond the surface of ritual and asking why these symbols matter. Books like this invite us to slow down and reflect on the ideas behind the traditions we inherit. They remind us that Freemasonry is not only something we practice in lodge, but something we study, contemplate, and continue to explore throughout our lives. If today's conversation did anything, we hope it encouraged you to pick up the book for yourself, wrestle with Mackey's ideas, and form your own interpretations of the symbols that surround our fraternity. So until next time, brethren, keep studying, keep seeking light, and as always, keep reading, brethren.